Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this wonderful Wednesday afternoon, And let me just adjust the brightness real quick. So there's a lot to unpack with basketball. There's actual news and actual things that went on this time as opposed to last time where it was a little bit of a dry day, but now there's a lot more to talk about. So in this first segment, we're going to talk about the Bucks versus Celtics game, and I'm not going to cover it on the recap because there's a lot that went down this game that's relatively important. And then in the second segment, we are going to talk about LeBron versus Steph Curry. They matched up against each other last night, so I'm going to talk about the story around that game, as well as the play-in implications that are moving forward. And then in the third segment, we're going to do a recap of all the NBA games that went down last night. Every single team played aside from the Brooklyn Nets and the Cleveland Cavaliers, so there's going to be a lot of games to cover on that. We also have a fourth segment, a very, very special fourth segment, so stay tuned all the way up to the third segment to figure out what that is. And I hope you guys tune into that one because I'm really going to like this fourth segment. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized. The link is displayed below the ticker as well. That is gsmcspodcast.net. Helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is gsmcspodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about the Bucks versus Celtics game. So as you could see by the description underneath me, Giannis got hurt in this game. It was a non-contact injury. He inbounded the ball, and as he was walking down, he just collapsed. He fell. And he was clutching onto his sort of, not his ankle, but like his left, not his knee either, but his left calf. That's what it was. I couldn't believe I forgot the word, but he was clutching on that. And it really looked like it was going to be, well, it looked serious, like from where usually the non-contact injuries are the ones that tend to be like more serious because it's like you have no idea exactly like what the injury is, especially if it's an injury that prevents one of these athletes from being able to walk. So immediately, once he went down, I just immediately thought, crap, Achilles injury or ACL injury, something of that nature. Like one of those injuries where it's like non-contact and it just tore. But after a while, and like after the Bucks' recent report, I'm just going to pull it up real quick just to make sure that I got it right. So he underwent an MRI, and it showed that he avoided any damage to his Achilles. So it's not a bad injury. Like, it's not one that's going to have him sidelined for the entirety of the season. However, depending on how he responds to treatment is going to matter going into the playoffs, because if he responds well, then he could be back in like a week or so. But if he doesn't respond well, then there's a possibility that he's not back for like 4 weeks. And when you're the Bucks going into the playoffs, on top of all of the other problems that the team has, that's like the last thing that should have happened. That's the last thing that the Bucks needed to worry about, losing their best player. And as if things couldn't get worse than it already is, they lost their best player. So just reading the report real quick again just to see if there's like, right. So depending on how bad the injury is, right now I think it's just sprained. Depending on how bad it is, he could be out for 1 to 2 weeks. He could be out to 2 to 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, etc. Things of that nature. But this is really bad timing for the Milwaukee Bucks. But the good news is that he avoided an Achilles injury, which would have been really, really bad, not just for the Bucks this season, but also going into next season, because again, you have no idea when he's going to recover and when he's going to make it back. But on the bright side, they don't have to worry about playing any play-in games. So the time that they would have taken to rest Giannis, like, for playoffs would have probably been the exact same amount of time than, like, for this injury. Like, the amount of time that they would have rested him if he wasn't injured is probably going to be the same time that they rest him since he is injured. So, again, it's all dependent on how Giannis responds. He usually recovers relatively quickly, and he's always, like, when he has gotten injured in the playoffs, he has played through it, but still, like, his team hasn't really found much success when he does get injured in the playoffs. So, something that's very, very concerning if you're a Bucks fan, the fact that Giannis went down. However, on the bright side, the Bucks ended up winning the game against the Celtics, 104-91. And if you are the Celtics, you should definitely be worried, because losing to, let me just pull up the box scores real quick, losing to a team that has been struggling recently with all of their players healthy is really, like, and considering, like, where the Boston Celtics are now compared to where the Bucks are, the Bucks weren't expected to win. And when Giannis went down, I thought it was like, okay, this is when Boston is going to start running away with it because Giannis went down. But that turned out to not be the case whatsoever, and the Bucks ended up beating them in a blowout win. And part of the reason why the Bucks ended up winning was because the Celtics attempted 0 free throws in the entirety of this game. In this entire game, only 2 free throws were shot, and they were both shot by the Milwaukee Bucks. And let me just see who shot those free throws. And Giannis was the one that ended up shooting those free throws. So there was no fouls really called in this game, and fan media was still complaining. Like, the Celtics, they became the first team ever to not shoot a free throw in any game, and seeing that now with how strict the refs are, well, not really strict, but, like, how ridiculous the refereeing is, and, like, how many foul calls are usually called on these players, it's really shocking how now, in this era, it's like we actually have a game where a team ended up shooting 0 free throws. Like, this is unheard of. And let me just go ahead and, because we do have Caruto in the chat once again. Good game, Lakers. I pray for the Lakers to get healthy. AD, please talk to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Ask him, can I have your goggles? That's really funny. But I don't think he needs goggles. What he needs is to actually continue to play these games, which he's been doing really well. Like, he hasn't really sat out many games this season, so being made out of glass, I think he sort of moved past those allegations. But regardless, the Celtics, they shouldn't have lost this game, and it somewhat makes sense how they didn't shoot free throws, because this team is very, very reliant on the three-point shot. They took 52 threes in this entire game, and when you're not going to the paint all that often, then you're not going to get foul calls all that often. So it makes sense how they ended up shooting 0 free throws. Of all the teams that was going to end up doing this, I think the Boston Celtics had the highest chance given their ridiculous three-point percentage. But with that in mind, like, the fact that they didn't end up getting a foul, it got a lot of criticism from the media, because it was like, why were the refs not calling any fouls? Which I don't understand, because it's like, we talk bad about how all of these players, they get ridiculous foul calls when they shouldn't get foul calls, but then when the referees actually let them play, we also have a problem. And I don't understand where the logic is behind that, because it's like, are we going to let these players play, or are we going to bicker about the refs not calling any fouls when they should call fouls? Like, it's like, pick a struggle at this point. And it's not something that I really, like, expected people to make a big deal out of, because it's like, they're just letting them play. There's, like, more motion going on in the game. The game is barely being stopped, and it's literally just basketball and no free throws. So it's like, I don't see what the problem was. Like, we all complain about how the game becomes boring after seeing a bunch of players, like, go to the line. It just becomes a free throw shooting competition. We talked about it. We criticize Harden for doing it. We criticize Joel Embiid for doing it. But then when we actually get a game where that doesn't happen, it's like, what? Like, then we start complaining about it, and I don't understand. And that's basically like the entire story of like the Bucks going up against the Celtics. Now, more on like Giannis's injury and like the implications going into the playoffs. It looks like the Bucks are going to either be playing in between the Sixers, the Heat, or the Pacers in the first round. So depending on who they match up against is going to be a problem. If they match up against actually, you know what? If they match up against any of these teams and Giannis isn't on it, I think they lose. Because if you look at the Sixers, if they match up against the Sixers in the first round, then there's no one on the team. Actually, you know what? I scratch that. I'm concerned to get for the Pacers and the Heat. Now, the reason why I said scratch the Sixers was because they still have a competent rim protector in Brook Lopez, who would be able to, theoretically, be able to hold Joel Embiid. However, I think Giannis would do a much better job at holding Joel Embiid than Brook Lopez would. But we'll see what the matchups are like that Doc Rivers is going to enforce. I'm not entirely sure if Doc Rivers was even thinking of putting Giannis on Joel Embiid. But if that is the case, then I thought that matchup would be a lot easier for Giannis to guard Joel Embiid. And now that they don't have Giannis, then they lack that rim protection and they lack that defender that they need to stop Joel Embiid. But Brook Lopez is still a competent rim protector, and he's still he can still make Joel Embiid's life rather difficult. But the Pacers, on the other hand, that's a team that I'm not entirely sure they're going to be able to beat if they match up against them in the first round, simply because of how quick their offense really is. And Giannis, being as dominant as he is, he can literally toy with that defense much better than what Dame would be able to do against that defense. At least for me, because the Pacers, they have no one on the team that can really stop Giannis. And when you have no one on the team that can stop Giannis, and Giannis is surrounded by a bunch of shooters, I think it's just a recipe for disaster. But again, they have that ridiculous offense. So Giannis might not be on the roster, and he might not be scoring as much. And because they're not scoring, the production wouldn't be the same because they're missing Giannis's production. I feel like the Pacers will be able to out-duel them in terms of scoring, especially since the Pacers, they're 4-1 against the Milwaukee Bucks in the regular season. So it's not a matchup that the Pacers would really be afraid of, especially with Giannis not being on the roster, because that just alleviates a lot of pressure for the Pacers. Now, for the Miami Heat, that's a little bit more difficult because this Heat team, it's proven that they can go off whenever in the postseason, and they have that on and off switch that they only turn on in the postseason. So they also have better matchups and better defenders than the Pacers do. So that team is going to be the team to worry about when going into the playoffs, especially since Miami is most likely going to take this series very personally, seeing as how Miami was expected to land Damian Lillard in the offseason, and then Dame ends up getting traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. And obviously Miami, they felt cheated because of that. And I feel like they're going to take this game a lot more personally, and they're going to take this series more personally than they normally would when going up against the Bucks. And you have to take that into account because when a lot of these players, when they take things personally, it's it completely changes the outcome of the game because there's a lot more drive in what they want rather than going into the game it's the Bucks, we've beaten them before, we can beat them again. Now it's more okay, we have to beat them. And so the mentality just changes, and it changes the overall flow, and it could change the flow of the series as well. So that's my take on it. That's my opinion. And with that, we are out of time for the first segment. So now I'm going to go into the second segment where I talk about the Lakers going up against the Golden State Warriors and that potential playoff matchup. Well, play-in matchup, I should say. So I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some loose shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back to the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about LeBron versus Steph. They matched up against each other last night, Lakers going up against the Warriors, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description or the link displayed below the ticker to get your comments recognized. And that is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is gsmcpodcast.net, displayed below the ticker on every show segment, as well as in the link in the description. So with that out of the way, we can go right ahead into the second segment and talk about LeBron going up against Steph. But actually, before I do that, there is some breaking news. There is an update that I would like to give all of you, so basically, okay, the audio will stop, thank you. So basically, the Karl-Anthony Towns, as we know, he's down with an injury, and I said I wasn't sure whether or not he would be healthy in time to make the playoffs. But now there is a new report from ESPN saying that there is a possibility that Karl-Anthony Towns could actually get back on the court before the playoffs even start. He recently participated in a scrimmage with the Timberwolves and was seen on the court. He was and the feeling around it was that they're very optimistic about him returning into the starting lineup. So this is huge for Minnesota. They were missing that key piece, and I think that if they went into the playoffs without Karl-Anthony Towns, they would have definitely struggled. So the fact that they are going to have him healthy along with Anthony Edwards is a very, very good sign for this Minnesota team, especially after coming off of the win that they did. So that's just a little update that I wanted to give, on the injury status of Karl-Anthony Towns. So let's go right ahead into this Lakers matchup and Golden State Warriors matchup where they played against each other. Again, it was LeBron versus Steph. This rivalry that's been going on for the longest time since 2015. It's been going on since they first met in the finals, and they met 4 straight years in a row. It's like there's no better headline than LeBron versus Steph. 2 of the best players in the game, 2 of some of the oldest players in the game as well, still going at it against each other. It always brings a lot of views, especially with the game being in LA. So the story of the game can be summed up as such. Steph Curry's teammates were hitting shots, LeBron's teammates weren't. And that usually, that seems to be the common theme between a lot of their matchups, because Steph Curry and LeBron, when you look at their stats side by side, LeBron brutally outplayed Steph in this game. But because Steph Curry had actual teammates that shot the ball and hit shots this game, it just became impossible for the Lakers to end up winning because of the performance that they had. They ended up making 26 threes, which is tied third for their franchise best, and is just 3 off of the most threes that a team made in an NBA game. So it took this ridiculous, historic performance for the Golden State Warriors to be able to knock off the Lakers in this game. And the Lakers, they also didn't have Anthony Davis. So that was literally just the whole story of the game. Steph Curry's teammates were hitting shots, LeBron's teammates weren't. And this is just like the theme. This is just expected when you're LeBron. Because when you look at the box scores, LeBron ended the game with he ended the game with 33 points, 7 rebounds, and 11 assists. And let's see what he shot. He shot 14 of 22 from the field, but that wasn't enough to beat Golden State, because Golden State shot 26 of 41 from 3, 63% from 3. And when a team shoots that good from the three-point line, it's very, very difficult to beat, especially when your team is shooting 34% from the three-point line and only made 12 threes. Like, it was a very, very bad night for the Lakers and their teammate and the teammates and everyone except LeBron, because, like, again, this happens like every single time. Looking at the rest of the box scores, Austin Reeves ended the game with 22 points. Roy Hachimura ended the game with 20 points and 11 rebounds. And D'Angelo Russell ended the game with 14 points. So, obviously, like, this team was missing Anthony Davis's production. So, I think if Anthony Davis was in this game, the story would have been played out differently than it did. And on the Warriors side, Klay Thompson ended up showing up in this game. He was in the starting lineup, and he ended the game with 27 points. Steph Curry ended the game with 23 points. Draymond Green ended with 15 points and 10 assists. Andrew Wiggins ended with 17 points. Chris Paul ended with 11. And that was basically all for the Warriors in terms of scoring. Everyone hit a three-pointer in this game, aside from the players that don't shoot threes, obviously. And it was overall just a dominant performance from this Warriors team. Steph Curry did not miss a single three. He only took 9 shots in this game. So the fact that he only took 9 shots and the Warriors, they were able to win by 14 points, it really shows like just how much better the roster is compared to the Lakers roster, especially since, Anthony Davis was out in this game. Now, Klay Thompson, 10 for 16 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3. So he had the shot. He had his shot in this game. And when the Warriors play like this, they're very, very difficult to beat. And they've, for the last few years, it seems like they would always play like this. And Steph Curry would always get bailed out by his teammates just being that much better. So it's really just like a battle between like the teammates when going up against when it's LeBron and Steph Curry. That's sort of been how it was when LeBron played him in 2015, when LeBron played him in 2017, and when LeBron played him in 2018. It was just Steph Curry, he was having the production, so was LeBron, but the biggest difference was that Steph Curry's teammates were hitting their shots and LeBron's teammates weren't. And going into the play-in, because these are the two teams that are expected to play against each other in the first round of the play-in yet again. The Lakers, they really needed this win, because if they would have gotten this win, then there was a huge possibility that they could have made it to they could have moved up in the seedings and make it to as much like the 8th seed or even the 7th seed if they would have gotten this win. But since they didn't get this win, they moved back down to the 9th seed, where they look to play in the play-in, which again is not ideal if you are LeBron and the Lakers, because playing more games is not healthy or is not good for LeBron, the oldest player in the league. So they really needed this win, and it took a historic game for the Warriors team to beat this Lakers team. So, and Anthony Davis not being in the game. So, with that in mind, I don't think when they're going to play against each other in the play-in, if that does happen, I don't think the Lakers are going to be on the losing end. Simply because, again, historic performance. They tied their third in the franchise record for most threes hit in a game. That is very, very rare, and that's probably not going to happen to them again, especially in the play-in. And it took that kind of performance. It took that kind of performance just for them to even beat the Lakers, on top of the fact that the Lakers didn't have Anthony Davis. And that, I think that really hurt the Lakers not having Anthony Davis. He's a lot more valuable this year than he was in like other previous years where it seems like it's LeBron doing everything. Like it does seem like LeBron's doing everything in this game, but without Anthony Davis, there was really nothing that they could have done. And going into the play-in, I don't really see the Lakers struggling to beat this Warriors team if they're fully healthy, because again, this is one of those performances where it's like once in a blue moon, I guess you could say, where it's like it's really not going to happen that often. Draymond Green shot 5 of 7 from 3. Like, that alone should tell you that, like, this type of performance is probably not going to happen again. And again, that was the main story with this Lakers matchup going up against the Warriors. LeBron was hitting shots, but his teammates weren't. And Steph Curry's teammates were all hitting shots. And I don't know why they, this always happens when they go up against, I don't know why this always happens when they match up against each other. And it's like LeBron does everything in his power to try and win the game, but like his teammates just hold him back. And it's really, really annoying. Especially like being a LeBron fan, it's really annoying because it's like then this allows Steph Curry to be put in arguments of being better than LeBron when he is clearly not better than LeBron, no matter how badly his fans want him to be. And it's like it shows that like Steph Curry, he really needs like that help in order to do something in the postseason. I don't want to say that he wasn't responsible for the success of the Warriors, but a lot of the times, whenever the Warriors end up winning, the team is very good and is very well-rounded around Steph Curry. And then when LeBron does it, it's usually like just LeBron most of the time. And that might just be, you might think that's biased, but in reality, it's really not, because when you look at 2015, it was literally just LeBron and the rest of the roster without Kyrie Irving and without Kevin Love. And the rest of the Warriors, they had Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Harrison Barnes, all of those players that were on the roster that just kept contributing as like the Cavs and the rest of the teammates, they weren't able to contribute. And Steph Curry, he played very well, but he also had ridiculous help. He didn't play as well as LeBron did in that series. Then 2016, when when all of the rosters were healthy, the Cavs ended up beating the same team, and then that team recruited Kevin Durant, a player that could hit ridiculous shots as well, and the team just was unbeatable with Steph Curry. And even afterwards, when the Warriors won the championship with Curry being the Finals MVP against the Boston Celtics, that team was still really, really good, having Jordan Poole coming off of the bench, and this was when Jordan Poole was playing his best basketball, averaging around 25, 30 points per game, coming off of the bench in the biggest stage. So, and on top of that, with Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and also Andrew Wiggins, who also provided a lot of production for the Warriors team. And it's all of that help taken into account that just makes the Warriors that much successful, and it just alleviates the pressure off of Steph Curry. And it gets really annoying how it always happens against LeBron. It gets really annoying. But that's basically like it for this segment and the matchups. I think the Lakers are going to be fine in the play-in against Golden State. I don't see them losing to Golden State in the play-in. And for the Warriors, it looks like they're going to have to like win out in the play-in in order to even make the playoffs, and I don't really see that happening if the Lakers are going to be their opponent. But with that, we are out of time for this second segment, So now I'm going to go into the third segment where I give a recap of all of the NBA games that went down last night. So I will be right back after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Okay, my OBS just froze for a second. Pardon me for that. But thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And here we are in the third segment where I'm going to give a quick recap of all of the NBA games that went down last night, because it was a really ridiculous night in the NBA tonight, and there was a lot of outstanding performances to go out, so I'm just going to list off all of them real quickly. Anthony Edwards ended with 51 points. That's a career high. 6 rebounds, 7 assists. Jalen Brunson ended the game with 45 points, as well as 7 of 12 from 3. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ended the game with 40 points, as well as 2 steals and 2 blocks, and shot 20 free throws. Luka Doncic ended the game with 39, 12, and 10. Joel Embiid ended with 37, 11, and 8. Fred VanVleet ended with 37, 8, and 6, along with a steal and a block. DeRozan ended the game with 34, 5, and 6. De'Aaron Fox ended the game with 33, 8, and 6. Tyler Hero ended the game with 33, 5, and 4. He's been averaging 24 points per game since in 3 games played since his return. And LeBron ended the game with 33, 7, and 11, along with 2 steals. Trey Murphy ended the game with 31, 8, and 3. Tyrese Halliburton ended the game with 35 and 5, along with a steal, shooting 10 of 16 from the field. DeAndre Ayton ended the game with 30, 13, and 1. DeJounte Murray ended the game with 29, 13, and 13. CJ McCollum ended the game with 29, 5, and 3. Jokic ended the game with 28, 13, and 7, along with 3 steals and a block. Jamal Murray ended the game with 28, 2, and 4, along with 4 steals and 4 blocks. Klay Thompson ended the game with 27, as I mentioned previously. Daniel Gafford ended the game with 26. Steph Curry ended the game with 23. Patrick Beverley ended the game with 20, 10, and 3 with 0 turnovers. Russell Westbrook ended the game with 16, 15, and 15, along with 2 steals coming off the bench. And actually, no, he wasn't coming off the bench. He was starting, And Victor Wembanyama ended the game with 18 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 7 blocks. In total, 51 players scored 20-plus points, 86 players scored 15-plus, and 139 players scored 10-plus. And the Cavs and Nets were the only team that did not play last night. So a lot of scoring and a lot of great performances coming in from a lot of these players going into these matchups, and it really just shows like how much better the overall skill of the NBA has improved as opposed to previous years. In previous years you wouldn't see any of these, as many players get as many points as they have, and like you wouldn't see this many players have ridiculous nights like this at the same time. So it really just shows like how much better the average player is, even though none of the players that I mentioned are average players, but it really just shows like how much better the league is now than it was previously. So going deeper into these games, the Mavericks, they ended up winning 130-104 against the Charlotte Hornets. As I mentioned previously, Luka Doncic had a ridiculous triple-double, 39, 10, and 12, 12 rebounds, 10 assists. And for Charlotte's side, they didn't really have many players play that well in terms of scoring, and they were a lot worse defensively, allowing Luka Doncic to end the game with this stat line. So not really much that needs to be talked about this game. I mean, it was literally just Luka being the dominant player that he always is, and Charlotte Hornets being a bottom-feeding team end up losing to them. So, again, they allowed this to happen the last time they matched up with Luka Doncic dropping a near triple-double against them in the last matchup. So, it makes total sense how they end up losing, and not really much that needs to be said. So the Knicks, they matched up against the Bulls. As I mentioned previously, the Jalen Brunson had a ridiculous 45-point game, and DeRozan had 34 points in this game. And the rest of the team, Kobe White ended with 24, Vucevic ended with 26, and Javonte Green ended with 12 rebounds and 9 points. Now, on the Knicks side, Josh Hart ended with 17 points and 13 rebounds. I swear, he is like a tank. He plays 46 minutes in like every single game. And OG Anunoby ended the game with 24 points, along with DiVincenzo, who ended the game with 21 points. So, very good overall production from the Knicks going into this game. Obviously, they benefited greatly with Jalen Brunson's performance, and this team is playoff ready. Like, they are ready for the playoffs, and I really think that they can make a deep run in this postseason, and I feel like the only thing that's detrimental to their success is the Boston Celtics, and I just feel like the Boston Celtics, they're the better team when compared to every other team in the Eastern Conference. But aside from that, I have the Knicks being right underneath them, especially now with how the Bucks, they're lacking Giannis, and the situation going on around Doc Rivers. It's like still up in the air on like exactly what the ceiling is for the Milwaukee Bucks. Then the Pistons, they ended up losing to the Sixers, I mean, obviously, because, you know, the Sixers are just a much better team. Joel Embiid, as I mentioned previously, 37 and 11. And Kelly Oubre ended with 17 points. Tobias Harris ended with 15 and 12. Now, there was no Maxey in this game, but that was no problem, given how much better the Sixers roster is without Maxey and with Joel Embiid. And the Pistons, obviously, bottom-feeding team. Not really much that needs to be covered when talking about them, because like they're already eliminated from the playoffs. Not much needs to be discussed. This was a very much needed win for the Sixers, however. Excuse me. As they're still trying to compete for that 6th seed between Miami and the Pacers. So they desperately needed that win, but it doesn't help them that the Pacers ended up beating the Raptors in this previous matchup, as I said that they would. They ended up winning 140 to 123, 140. So, again, Halliburton, he ended the game with 30 points. Very dominant game coming in from him. Siakam ended with 16 points, and Miles Turner also ended with 16 points. Obi Toppin came off the bench, ended with 23 points. TJ McConnell, ended the game with 17 points. And again, this Raptors team, they're tanking right now because they don't have their best player, Scotty Barnes, and there's not really much hope for this team, especially since they've been eliminated from the playoffs, so they're just tanking in these games. It was much needed win for the Pacers, so that way they could hold that 6th seed, and again, it also makes it a lot more difficult for the Sixers to end up retaking that 6th seed, because like they ended up winning, and it just ups their wins, and like it doesn't really do much in the standings. The Heat also ended up winning last night, which also doesn't help the Sixers for the standings. They ended the game 117 to 111. DeJounte Murray, again, he ended the game with 29, 13, and 13, which is partly why they ended up being so close in terms of matchups. DeAndre Hunter ended the game with 23 and 11, and let's see what else. again, as I mentioned previously, Tyler Hero, 33 points. Jimmy Butler had only 25 points. And Bam Adebayo only had 10 points despite playing every single minute of this game. So, and also the game went into double overtime, I should say, excuse me. So the fact that this game went into double overtime and the score was 117 to 111 as if it was a normal game is actually kind of concerning if you're the Miami Heat, because it's like, why aren't you scoring more? Why does it take double overtime for you to get 117 points? So a little bit of a questioning performance coming in from them, but a win is a win, so don't really need to talk about that game that much. Again, it's a bottom-feeding team. Now, the Thunder, they ended up beating the Kings in their matchup 112 to 105. I thought that the Kings were going to end up winning in this matchup, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was not having that. Again, he ended the game with 40 points. Jalen Williams ended with 11. Chet ended with 15. And Lou Dort ended with 18 points. So great production coming in from this team, as well as the production coming in from Shai Gilgeous. They desperately needed it in order to stay above and win in this game. They wouldn't have won without that 40-point performance. And De'Aaron Fox ended the game with 33 points, as I mentioned previously. Keegan Murray ended with 15 and 10. Sabonis ended with only 8 points and 13 rebounds. I believe that ends his double-double streak. However, I feel like the fact that Sabonis wasn't scoring as much, that was sort of the biggest difference maker in this game. I don't know, Chet must have really bothered him when he was in the paint because, Chet's length and things of that nature. It's, really difficult to get a shot off when being guarded by Chet. But Chet only ended with 2 blocks in this game. So it's not even like he was getting a bunch of blocks, and it was just Sabonis really missing. And I feel like if Sabonis would have ended up hitting the shots and being as consistent as he normally is, the Kings would have ended up winning despite Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scoring 40 points, which is a little bit concerning if you are OKC, because it took a very bad performance from an MVP caliber player in order for you guys to come out on top. So, again, nothing that the Kings should really be concerned about. It was just an off night for Sabonis. If he plays like that normally, then they'll be fine. But they'll also, they have to get ready for that play-in spot, because this loss doesn't help them in the standings whatsoever. They're still 8th in the standings for the Western Conference, and being 8th in the standings, it's not really ideal when the teams that you could be facing are between Phoenix, the Pelicans, the Lakers, and Golden State. Especially Golden State, because the Kings, they have a history of losing to Golden State. And given the fact that they didn't have that much experience, and with that in mind, it's there's a huge possibility that the Warriors, if they match up against the Kings, they could beat them again. I won't put it past them because they've done it before. They can do it again, especially with Steph Curry and his ridiculous performances when he goes up against the Kings. So, not really something that the Kings, I guess, should really worry about losing this game. But they need to worry about the play-in. They desperately need to worry about the play-in. I don't see them making it out of the play-in spot. I think the Lakers, they have a better chance of making it out, but we'll see how the standings are towards the end. Now, let's see, what's the next game? The Magic, they ended up losing to the Houston Rockets, which is very, very shocking. The Rockets ended up winning 118 to 106. And behind Fred VanVleet's 37 points, obviously, like I mentioned previously. And, again, very, very concerning if you're the Orlando Magic, because you're losing to a team that just got eliminated from playoff contention. And they're not that bad. The Houston Rockets, they're a decent team. They're not that good when you look at the standings, but outside of the standings, they have a very talented roster. And the fact that the Magic, they couldn't end up winning this game, and they had no one really performing that well coming off the bench or in the starting lineup. Paolo Banchero was the leading scorer with 21 points, and that basically says all that you need to know about the Magic and their situation. Looking at the box scores more, Jabari Smith Jr. ended the game with 23 points alongside Fred VanVleet's 37. And their scoring was overall just much better than the Magic, and they shot better. They shot a lot better from three, 15 of 35 for 42%, compared to the Magic, who shot 7 of 24, 29%. As I mentioned previously in the other segment, when you're going up against a team that's shooting that much better from three than you are, it's very, very difficult to come out on top. And it's like, this is very, very concerning for the Orlando Magic. Now, it doesn't really affect them much in terms of standings. They are the 4th seed, and regardless whether they're like the 4th seed or the 5th seed, it looks like they're going to be playing either between the Knicks or the Cavs, and I don't really see them making it out of the first round regardless. So, and this loss to Houston sort of just confirms that, and I really don't understand like why it's why they ended up losing this game. Like, this was not a good game for them to lose whatsoever. Also, I forgot to mention Jalen Suggs. He was also a great scorer in this game. 7 of 13, 21 points. Also helped the Orlando Magic when we're talking about scoring. But still, losing to a team like this, not ideal. Now, the Spurs, they beat the Memphis Grizzlies 102-87. Blowout win coming in from the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama and his 7 blocks were obviously a big reason as to why they didn't end up getting more points on the board. And this Grizzlies team, they're rebuilding. And a little bit news on Ja Morant. It was confirmed that Ja Morant acted in self-defense when he punched that teenager. So there was a whole court case going on whether or not he was he was acting in self-defense, or whether or not he just did it just because, there's he's trying to be a thug. I'm using that in quotes because the way that he presents himself on the media, it's as if it's something that he's not, because Ja Morant is far from a thug, but everything that he does on social media gives a lot of people that perception. And he wasn't, in this case, he wasn't being a thug. He wasn't flashing a gun on IG Live. He wasn't doing any of that, but rather he was acting in self-defense. So I feel like that's sort of important news that I should bring up, just because, I'm talking about the Grizzlies. And there's not really much hope for either of these teams, so I don't really need to talk about much about this game. Now, the Wizards, they ended up losing to the Timberwolves, and this was an embarrassing loss for the Wizards because they were up by around 20 points at I believe it was the first quarter. Let me just go ahead and look at the play-by-play. Yeah, in the first quarter, the score was 44-26 in favor of Washington, and as the game progressed, they gradually, the Timberwolves, they started coming back, and it's really a disappointing loss when you're looking at the Wizards because they were up by this much, and they allowed Anthony Edwards to get a career-high 51 points. So Rudy Gobert also ended with 19 and 16. And on the Wizards side, Jordan Poole ended with 24 points, and Corey Kispert ended the game with 25 points. And the rest of the starters, they all ended with 15-plus points. So they played great. They played great in this game. But it's just that lead that was blown. It's they just needed to hold on to that lead, and they just couldn't, given how bad this team is. This is the worst Washington Wizards team ever, because they have the worst record in franchise history, and obviously with having the worst record, this means that this is the worst lineup that the Wizards have had in recent memory. So regardless of them being the worst, that's still very, very embarrassing. Now, speaking of leads almost being blown, the Clippers, they almost blew a huge lead to the Phoenix Suns, but that ended up not being the case, as they ended up winning 105-92, and they hold off the Suns just long enough to prevent them from making that comeback. So, the Clippers, in the first quarter, the first quarter of this game, the Clippers were up 37-10 on the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix was struggling badly, and there was a point where Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, they were 0 for 5 from the field, both of them separately. So that's a combined 0 of 10 from the field from your two best players. Devin Booker ended the game shooting 1 for 11 from the field, and Kevin Durant ended the game shooting 8 for 22 from the field and only got 21 points. Bradley Beal ended the game with 6 of 13 with 19 points, but this is sort of the problem that I've been saying about the Phoenix Suns. When none of their players are playing well, you need that player to step up, and they just don't have the defense to be able to counter if some of their star players aren't scoring as consistently as they usually do. Players can have an off night, especially when going up against the Clippers, who are surrounded by very good perimeter defenders. Now, the Clippers, they didn't have Kawhi Leonard in this game, which adds on to the fact that the Phoenix Suns losing in embarrassing fashion is just like, it adds on to that embarrassment. Now, Russ, he ended the game 16, 15, and 15, triple-double. Like, what else is new? And he also shot 7 of 17 from the field. And Paul George ended the game with 23 points, 7 of 15 from the field. Excuse me. So, overall, just very good performance coming in from the Clippers. And it was in that third quarter where it looked like the Clippers were going to blow this game, because in the third quarter, the Phoenix Suns outscored them 35-18. So it really looked like the Phoenix Suns were going to end up coming back, but thankfully, due to Russell Westbrook and his performance and his hustle and all of that, they ended up holding off the Phoenix Suns just long enough so that way they could win the game. So, potential matchup in the playoffs? Maybe, but we'll see how it goes. Pelicans ended up matching up against the Trailblazers. 110-100 was the final score. And with this win, they move back up to the 6th seed and avoid play-in contention. Again, the standings are probably going to change. In a few days, they're probably going to change. But like I mentioned earlier, Trey Murphy, the third, ended the game with 31. CJ McCollum ended the game with 29. Zion Williamson ended the game with 22. And there's not really much that needs to be said because the Trailblazers, they are a bottom-feeding team. Even with DeAndre Ayton scoring 30 and 13, not really much that needs to be said because it was basically expected that they were going to come into this game losing. And the last game, the Nuggets ended up playing the Jazz, and obviously the Jazz rebuilding team, and the Nuggets just coming off the championship, probably going to repeat again. So not really much of a story that needs to be talked about with this game because the better team ended up winning. Even with the ridiculous performances, they probably would have won regardless. So with that, we are out of time for this third segment. So now I'll be going into my highly anticipated fourth segment where I talk about a specific player from Villanova who has just declared for the NBA draft, and you'll see why he's very significant to me personally later on in the fourth segment. So I will be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm going to bring attention to a Villanova player named Mark Armstrong, who has just recently declared for the NBA draft. Now, you guys are probably wondering, who is this? And, why is this, an important topic of conversation? Well, the reason why it's important to me is because Mark Armstrong went to my high school. I saw that man play basketball and in person before he was this big basketball, this big college player that he is now. And seeing that he is now declaring for the NBA draft after watching him play in high school is astonishing. And it's just yes, let's go. This is something that he's dreamed of for the longest time. And it's something that we all sort of expected to happen. Like, everyone that graduated from that high school, we all expected him to be an NBA star. And now it's like he's finally like living up to that dream of his and living up to the expectations that we all expected of him. And it's like, it's phenomenal. So a little bit of background, like with Mark Armstrong, he went to high school in St. Peter's Prep. Again, same high school as me. He is our leading scorer in our entire program's history. And this is impressive because he broke this record while having a COVID year. Like, he broke the scoring record while we had a shortened season due to COVID. So imagine how many points he could have ended up having, and imagine how many points he could have ended up leading by if he didn't have that COVID year. And I was there for that game where he ended up breaking the scoring record for our school. And that was a very, very big moment, obviously. Like, I've seen him, he is a phenomenal player, and it's like, he plays, like, I'll read the scouting reports, but, like, he's ridiculous. And he was also a part of the men's USA under-18 team, and he helped lead that team to winning a gold medal. So he is a gold medalist already, and he's not even started his NBA career. And when you think about it like that, that is just ridiculous. Like, that is astonishing. The fact that he is already, like, a champion, a world champion, like an Olympic champion, is a very, very big deal. And it's something that really gets brushed off when talking about the NBA for some reason. Like, Olympic championships are, like, and Olympic gold medals, it's a huge honor to have. And, like, the fact that he already has one and he got one as a high schooler is amazing to me. Now, a little bit overview of his stats. His stats, they don't scream NBA caliber player. I'm not gonna lie to you. His first year on Villanova with the new coach, because like he didn't end up going into the transfer portal. Unlike most college high schoolers who ended up using the transfer portal after declaring for Villanova, because he declared for Villanova at around the same time that their coach, their very prestige head coach, decided to leave the program. And a lot of people thought he was going to enter the transfer portal or declare for another team, but he ended up staying with Villanova in that program, and he ended up averaging 5 points per game, shot 40% from the field and 24% from three. Now, in his second year, he ended up averaging 8 points per game and 41% from the field and 28% from three. So again, while it doesn't seem like it's NBA caliber, or first round pick caliber, that doesn't mean that he's not going to get picked in the draft. So I'm going to look at the scouting reports and read off exactly what these players think, what these scouts think of him. And Armstrong, he's an extremely quick combo guard that was a solid piece off the bench for Villanova as a freshman. While he does lack height, he's a great athlete and is strong relative to his weight. What's evident about Armstrong is that he's tough and plays with an edge. He's got New Jersey flair, and his energy on the floor is contagious. Most players of Armstrong's size play below the rim, but he's quite the opposite. The Villanova guard is very bouncy and leverages his vertical and powerful pop to play above the rim often. When he's not dunking the ball, he has impressive body control and finishes well in traffic for an undersized guard. Armstrong has a great series of dribble moves he uses, with the crossover being his most frequent and effective option. The mid-range is where Armstrong is tough to defend. He's dangerous just inside the arc, manipulating his defenders with his ability to pull up with a jumper or take them to the rim. A legitimate self-creator, he has no problem getting to his spots and scoring. Armstrong also has a promising three-point stroke, but struggled in his first college season from that range. While his shot does have some dip in it, he's fundamentally sound and has good mechanics. That, along with the fantastic free throw shooting, gives us optimism that he will end up being a quality perimeter shooter. So, if you're going to want to compare him to like an NBA player, I feel like Russell Westbrook is probably like the best comparison in terms of offensive play style, because like, again, he's a relatively shorter guard, or even Donovan Mitchell. Honestly, Donovan Mitchell or Russell Westbrook are a very good comparison because they're relatively small guards, but they do have that bounce to meet a lot of defenders at the rim, while at the same time having a dangerous mid-range pull-up that keeps defenders on their toes, which is why I primarily associate him with Westbrook, because Westbrook in his MVP season and before that, he had a ridiculous mid-range shot and it was very, very consistent. So on top of the fact that he's able to finish around the rim, like Mark Armstrong, he can get up there. He is a ridiculous dunker for his height. And I even on my phone, I have a clip of him jumping over someone in a pickup game. Like, he literally jumped over someone to dunk on them in a pickup game while wearing khaki pants. Like, that is insane to me. Like, and that's ridiculous how someone is that athletic. Now, an improving facilitator, Armstrong's ability to pass the ball and orchestrate the offense will be something he will need to really flash this year. Any player of his size has to do more than score to get drafted. And on the defensive end, he is quick and pesky, but struggles in quite a few situations. He generates steals at a solid rate, but is also easily bullied by bigger offensive players. The former 4-star recruit had the opportunity to play in front of NBA scouts almost every game last season with Cam Whitmore as a teammate. So, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, like his success with Team USA on the under-18 team, and I feel like that's also like going to add on to like his resume and will help him get drafted. So he's projected to be a second-round pick in the 2024 draft, which again isn't bad. And again, there's still more to improve in his game, which I don't see why he can't improve when he's in the league. And like, there's not much negative that's coming from the scouting report, in like, at least from this last scouting report. This scouting report was done like a while ago, but regardless, it's like he's just that good. Like, in my opinion, he is that guy, and he was that guy on high school, and I don't see why he couldn't be that guy on an NBA team. So here's a little bit more draft notes coming in. He's tough, hard-nosed guard who plays with an edge, brings it on both ends on the floor. He's not the biggest player and might not have ideal height, but is strong, tough, and bouncy, and can really play above the rim. Has a combo guard skill set, and will have to develop his playmaking at the NBA level, which is honestly, that's something that like he's struggled with in high school as well. But primarily, I thought it was because like there was no need for him to pass when he was on high school, because it's like he was able to score on anyone regardless. But that's going to be the aspect of his game that really needs like improvement if he wants to be a legitimate guard in the NBA. It's his playmaking and his ability to like be a facilitator. So just wanted to bring attention to that, because it's like, again, from my high school, and we're going to see him potentially get drafted in the same draft class as Bronny James if Bronny James gets drafted this year. That's a big if, but we'll see how that goes. So that's all I got for this fourth segment, and with that, that is the end of the entire show. So that's the end of this fourth segment. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as I said previously in the first two segments, remember to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. Use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, or the link in the description. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And again, that is it for the show. That's it for this fourth segment. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.